India Newshour, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour. Prime Minister Modi delivers the Ramnath Goenka lecture, says India is not just an emerging market, but also an emerging model of growth. Bangladesh tribunal sentences former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to death for crimes against humanity. Hasina calls it politically motivated, says tribunal set up by unelected government with no democratic mandate. Ukraine to buy up to 100 Rafale fighter jets and other military hardware from France. And Taiwan says regional peace is severely impacted by China in its row with Japan over the island territory. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te asks Beijing to show restraint. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday delivered the 6th Ramnath Goenka lecture in New Delhi, a platform that hosts influential voices who have shaped change and provoked critical thinking on some of the most urgent contemporary issues. Addressing the gathering, the Prime Minister highlighted the remarkable resilience of the Indian economy and India's sustained growth trajectory. He said that despite severe disruptions in global supply chains and energy markets, India's economic growth has remained robust, underscoring the strength and stability of the nation's economic fundamentals.
साल 2022 में यूरोपियन क्राइसिस के कारण पूरे दुनिया की सप्लाई चेन और एनर्जी मार्केट प्रभावित हुआ। इसका असर पूरी दुनिया पर पड़ा। इसके बावजूद भी 2022-23 में हमारी इकोनॉमी की ग्रोथ तेजी से होती रही। साल 2023 में वेस्ट एशिया में स्थितियां बिगड़ी, तब भी हमारी ग्रोथ रेट तेज रही। और इस साल भी जब दुनिया में अस्थिरता है, तब भी हमारी ग्रोथ रेट 7% के आसपास है। साथियों, आज जब दुनिया डिसरप्शन से डर रही है, भारत वाइब्रेंट फ्यूचर के डायरेक्शन में आगे बढ़ रहा है।
Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal has sentenced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to death in a case over alleged crimes against humanity. A 3-member tribunal also pronounced its judgment against Hasina's 2 aides.
Bangladesh's deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was on Monday sentenced to death in absentia by a special tribunal for crimes against humanity committed during the widespread protests against her government in July last year. The 3-member bench, led by Justice Mohammad Ghulam Murtaza Mazumdar, read from a 453-page judgment that found Hasina guilty of ordering action against protesters.
In view of all the above facts and circumstances and findings, it is hereby ordered that accused Sheikh Hasina be found guilty on 3 counts under charge 1. Count number 1, incitement. Count number 2, order to kill. Count number 3, inaction to prevent the atrocities and failing to take punitive actions against the perpetrators, and thus she is punishable.
Reading out the judgment before a heavily guarded courtroom in Dhaka, the tribunal said the prosecution had proved beyond reasonable doubt that Hasina was responsible for the deadly crackdown during the July uprising.
On the second count, killing 6 persons at Sankarpur of Dhaka, which was committed in contemplation, in furtherance by virtue of her order, as stated beforehand. And similarly, she committed the same crime, that is the crime against humanity, on another count for causing the killings at Ashulia of Sabar, killing of 6 persons. For all these 3 counts, we have decided to inflict her with only one sentence, that is sentence of death.
Hasina condemned the ruling as biased and politically motivated, saying the trial conducted without her presence and with a state-appointed lawyer was unfair. She maintains she is willing to face a new trial under an international tribunal. Rabindra Chauhan's report, DD India.
Sheikh Hasina reacted sharply to the verdict. Her strong statement, coupled with questions over last year's unrest, have all added a new dimension to the ongoing political situation in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on Monday denounced the guilty verdict and death sentence handed to her in a crimes against humanity case, calling the judgment biased and politically motivated. In a strongly worded statement, Hasina said, "The verdicts announced against me have been made by a rigged tribunal established and presided over by an unelected government with no democratic mandate. They are biased and politically motivated." Hasina rejected all accusations, saying she was not given fair chance to defend her case in court. She said, and I quote, "For the record, I wholly deny the accusations that have been made against me in the ICT. I mourn all of the deaths that occurred in July and August of last year on both sides of the political divide. But neither I nor other political leaders ordered the killing of protesters. I note that I was given no fair chance to defend myself in court, nor even to have lawyers of my own choice represent me in absentia." Besides, Sheikh Hasina also reiterated her demand that the case be taken to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. She wrote in her statement. She added that she is ready to face her accusers in a credible judicial forum, reiterating her demand that the case be taken to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, a move she claims the interim government fears as it would expose its own human rights record. Moreover, Hasina also accused Yunis' government of coming to power unconstitutionally. She said, and I quote, "Our government was democratically elected by people and we were accountable to them. Dr. Yunus, on the other hand, came to power unconstitutionally and with the support of extremist elements." Meanwhile, India said on Monday it has noted the verdict against Hasina. In a brief statement, the Foreign Ministry said, and I quote, "India has noted the verdict announced by the International Crimes Tribunal of Bangladesh concerning former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. As a close neighbor, India remains committed to the best interest of the people of Bangladesh, including in peace, democracy, inclusion, and stability in that country. We will always engage constructively with all stakeholders to that end." Now let's trace our case since protests erupted in July-August 2024 in Bangladesh. Between July and August 2024, the protests eventually forced the fall of Hasina's 15-year Awami League government by early August. August 5, 2024. After protesters stormed her residence, Hasina fled Bangladesh and went into exile. June 1st, 2025. The International Crimes Tribunal or ICT in Dhaka officially began the in absentia trial of Sheikh Hasina. July 10, 2025. The tribunal formally indicted Hasina and the others. October 23, 2025. The tribunal concluded the hearing after more than 28 working days and 54 witnesses. As the political turmoil deepens in Bangladesh, Hasina's rejection of the verdict adds new layers to an already volatile crisis. Bureau Report for DD India.
The United Nations has called the sentencing of former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for crimes against humanity an important moment for victims, but says she should not have been given the death penalty. In a statement, UN spokeswoman Ravina Shamdasani said, "We have been calling for perpetrators, including individuals in positions of command and leadership, to be held accountable in accordance with international standards. But we had also consistently advocated for all accountability proceedings, especially on charges of international crimes, to unquestionably meet international standards of due process and fair trial." Now, this is particularly vital when, as was the case here, the trials have been conducted in absentia and led to a capital punishment sentence. We regret the imposition of the death penalty, which we oppose in all circumstances, unquote. Still to come on DD India News Hour. What a U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean means for Venezuela. And Chile's presidential election to go to a runoff vote on 14th December.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Tensions are rising in the Caribbean as U.S. amasses its naval forces near Venezuela. Fresh American anti-narcotics operations and growing global support for Venezuela's opposition are fueling speculation of major political shifts. Experts say external pressure, not military intervention, may ultimately force change in Venezuela. DD India's Nishchoy Roy reports.
Venezuela today stands at a dramatic crossroads. A nation gripped by its deepest political turmoil in decades as global pressure tightens around President Nicolas Maduro. With US warships edging closer, Nobel recognition energizing the opposition, and millions of Venezuelans battling economic despair, the stage is set for a high-stakes geopolitical showdown. Venezuela is experiencing its most severe political crisis since Hugo Chavez came to power in 1999. An increasingly isolated and widely viewed illegitimate regime now finds itself under intensifying US pressure, with Washington framing its action as part of a major anti-drug operation. Speculation surged on Sunday after the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, arrived in the Caribbean Sea. The deployment has fueled claims that the US may be targeting President Nicolas Maduro under the Trump administration's anti-narco-terrorism campaign. Amid the military buildup, President Donald Trump signaled he could hold discussions with Maduro, a notable shift even as the Venezuelan leader remains under the US scrutiny.
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. And we may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk. Venezuela would like to talk. What does it mean? You tell me. I don't know. You want to talk to them? I talk to anybody. I talk to you, right? I talk to anybody. We'll see what happens.
The Pentagon announced another strike on an alleged drug trafficking vessel in Eastern Pacific. US Southern Command said the boat, operated by a designated terrorist organization, was moving narcotics along a known trafficking route in the international waters. 3 men, described by the officials as narco-terrorists, were killed. The Maduro government continues to accuse the United States of attempting regime change through military intimidation and an expanding footprint in Latin America. Experts say the most likely transition scenario does not involve a direct foreign military intervention. Instead, sustained external pressure could fracture the ruling elite from within, paving the way for a negotiated exit for Maduro. History shows that coordinated global pressure, backed by credible enforcement, can shift the calculations of authoritarian regimes in ways domestic forces alone often cannot. With Nishchor Roy, Amit Mukherjee for DD India.
President Emmanuel Macron of France and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday signed a letter of intent for Kyiv to acquire up to 100 Rafale fighter jets and other air defense hardware from French companies, the French presidency said. The accord sets out possible future contracts for the acquisition by Ukraine of 100 Rafale fighter jets with their associated weapons, as well as the new generation air defense system under development, radar systems and drones. The letter of intent, which is not a purchase and sales contract, is projected to be realized over a time frame of about 10 years, the French presidency added. President Zelensky said that he has signed a deal with France in Paris to acquire up to 100 Rafale fighter jets aimed at strengthening Ukraine's long-term military capacity against Russia's invasion. Discussions in recent weeks have focused on boosting Ukraine's air defenses. The questions remain over how much support France can provide amid its own political and budgetary strains. Tensions are mounting across East Asia tonight as Japan, China and Taiwan find themselves locked in a diplomatic storm. At the center of the turmoil, remarks from Japan's Prime Minister on Taiwan that have sparked sharp reactions from Beijing. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay brings us this report.
A senior Japanese diplomat, Masaki Kanai, arrived in Beijing today in a bid to ease the escalating row. Kanai, who heads the Foreign Ministry's Asia and Oceania Bureau, is set to meet his Chinese counterpart Liu Jinsong this week. He is expected to clarify that Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's comments do not mark a shift in Japan's security policy and to urge China to avoid actions that could further strain ties. The dispute erupted earlier this month when Prime Minister Takaichi told lawmakers that a Chinese attack on Taiwan threatening Japan's survival could trigger a military response. Beijing reacted sharply, warning its citizens to avoid travel to Japan. China's foreign ministry said country's Premier Li Qiang will not be meeting Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi on the sidelines of the upcoming G20 summit in South Africa.
The Japanese side should adhere strictly to the spirit of the 4 political documents between China and Japan and immediately look to correct their erroneous statements and actions to prevent further damage to China-Japan relations.
Adding fuel to the fire, Japanese officials condemned Chinese Coast Guard ships sailing near the Japan-administered Senkaku Islands. Meanwhile, Taiwan accused China of severely undermining regional peace through its confrontation with Japan.
China's mixed attacks against Japan has severely impacted peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. I urge the international community to continue to pay attention to the situation, and I call on China to show restraint, act like a major power, and not become the troublemaker in the region.
However, diplomatic efforts are going on to calm the tension. Whether it succeeds or not is yet to be seen. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday urged Republican lawmakers to vote for the release of files related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, reversing his earlier resistance to such a move. President Trump's post on his Truth Social account came after Speaker Mike Johnson said earlier that he believed that a vote on releasing Justice Department documents in the Epstein case should help put to rest allegations that President Trump had any connection to Epstein's abuse and trafficking of underage girls. President Trump on Friday withdrew his support for Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican lawmaker from the state of Georgia, following her criticism of the Republican Party on certain issues, including the handling of the Epstein files. Marjorie Taylor Greene had accused Democrats of pushing an Epstein hoax after emails emerged in which the disgraced financier suggested that President Trump knew about the girls. She said earlier that President Trump's online criticism had unleashed a surge of threats directed at her. She attributed her split with the U.S. president to her support for releasing records related to Epstein. Chile's presidential election will go to a runoff vote in December between a communist and a far-right candidate after the first round on Sunday produced no outright winner. The Communist Party's Janet Jara from the governing coalition narrowly won the first round, followed closely by far-right candidate Jose Antonio Cast. Jara vowed to strengthen immigration controls and pursue organized crime by lifting banking secrecy laws. Jara, who would become Chile's first Communist Party presidential finalist, promised to bolster police forces and implement preventive measures. Chile's President Gabriel Boric congratulated Jara and Cast after the two candidates advanced to the runoff. The result set up a 14 December runoff between the two political extremes. 8 candidates competed in Sunday's first round, though none achieved the 50% plus one vote needed to win outright. The campaign was dominated by voter concerns over crime and immigration, issues that have reshaped Chile's political landscape. South Korea's defense ministry said on Monday that it has proposed talks with North Korea's military to discuss setting a clearer boundary along the military demarcation line between the two Koreas to avoid the risk of potential military clashes. South Korea's deputy defense minister said while North Korea has been setting up barbed wire fences on its side of the border, some of soldiers had repeatedly intruded onto the South Korean side, raising concerns about a potential clash.
북한군의 군사 분계선 침범과
Repeated incursions across the MDL by North Korean military and our military's responses in accordance with established procedures have heightened tensions within the demilitarized zone. There is growing concern that if this situation persists, it could escalate into a military clash between the two Koreas.
India's electronics manufacturing push gets a 7,100 crore rupee boost. At an event held in New Delhi, leaders and industry hailed the move to position India as a trusted global hub. DD India's Tapas Bhattacharya has more.
India's electronics story is entering a new era, one driven by ambition, innovation, and a powerful policy push. The Electronics Component Manufacturing Scheme, or ECMS, is accelerating India's journey from vision to commitment. With a second tranche of approvals worth over 7,100 crore rupees, the nation is firmly stepping into high-value component manufacturing, from HDI and multi-layer PCBs to camera modules, copper-clad laminates, and passive components. At an event in New Delhi, graced by Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav and Minister of State Jatin Prasada and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology officials, India unveiled the roadmap of the future.
We focused on certain specific components rather than spreading it thin. We focused on a set of components which are very critical for a long-term growth of the electronics manufacturing ecosystem. With that, the ECMS was conceived, approved by Honorable Prime Minister, and then finally it was rolled out very recently, and I am glad that the team is working so hard that practically every week new approvals are happening.
ECMS doesn't stand alone. It integrates seamlessly with India's broader vision, the Electronics Manufacturing PLI, the Indian Semiconductor Mission, the DLI scheme for fabless design, and RDI initiatives that power next-gen research and innovation. Together, they complete a full value chain, materials to components, chips to device, and design to manufacturing.
My first ask is development team. Second ask is quality. And third ask is, as far as possible, for everything that you use in your factory, in your plant, in your laboratory, get Swadeshi, get Atmanirbharta. Focus on developing Indian suppliers. Make sure that they also come up to quality levels. Make sure that you hold hands and get them up the value chain. That will define your success in the coming years.
India is not just participating in the global electronics revolution, it is positioning itself as a trusted hub and an emerging product nation for the world. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
Still to come on DD India News Hour. An expert take on implications of Bangladesh court verdict for Sheikh Hasina and her party. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Right, going back to the top story we are tracking here on DD India, the sentence given to Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh by a tribunal there. Joining us for more are Professor Veena Sikri and Professor Prabhash Ranjan. Professor Sikri is a former High Commissioner to Bangladesh and Malaysia. She's now associated with the Jamia Millia Islamic University, New Delhi. And Professor Ranjan is Vice Dean at Jindal Global Law School at Sonipat. Ambassador Sikri, Professor Ranjan, welcome to DD India. If I can start with you, Ambassador Sikri, how do you view the verdict?
Well, I think in a way this verdict was inevitable because the whole narrative has been so skewed against Sheikh Hasina from the very start.
Right.
This court, this International Crimes Tribunal, the ICT as it is called in Bangladesh, has no authority at all to try Sheikh Hasina. We know that the regime of Muhammad Yunus is an unconstitutional one. There is no parliament. Parliament has been dissolved. This ICT was constituted solely to try war crimes committed during the 1971 Liberation War. And then when Yunus came to power, the first thing he did was he has completely weaponized the judiciary. He, in his regime, all the senior judges were forced to resign, either through mobs and mobocracy. You're showing on the visuals all these, the mobs running riot in Bangladesh, which has been happening for the last 15 months. And all their houses were attacked, etc. When all of them resigned, then Muhammad Yunus appointed people of his choice, mostly those close to the Awami League, close to the Jamaat-e-Islami. For example, the lawyer who had been defending the Jamaat-e-Islami leaders accused of war crimes in 1971 now became the chief prosecutor for the ICT. So it was quite inevitable when Muhammad Yunus announced that the cases against Sheikh Hasina were tried in the ICT. Everybody knew this was absolutely the end. This is a kangaroo court, and there is going to be a death sentence.
Indeed.
At the same time, it is so amazing that all the incidents of killing and mob violence, burning of police stations, killing of policemen, looting of policemen's weapons, all those which were committed by the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Islami Chhatra Shibir, all being described as students, all these people have received indemnity. They have been completely indemnified for all that they have done, saying this is an uprising or revolution, not at all looking at the fact that this was a very meticulously designed regime change operation. And at the same time, whatever Sheikh Hasina did, even acts which happened after she left Dhaka on 5th August, are being blamed on her, and she has been given the death sentence. So I think this is absolutely fair to say that this is a completely unfair and unacceptable sentence. And I think that the fact that within hours of the sentence immediately they're asking for the extradition of Sheikh Hasina shows what their real intention is, but it also shows that they do not understand what the extradition process is. And the extradition certainly cannot be done in within 24 hours. It's a completely complex process which involves even a court case in India. Once India receives all the papers from the ICT, why she was tried, what were the cases against her, what was the evidence presented, was the evidence correctly evaluated. All that is going to be discussed in an Indian court and a decision passed before anything can happen.
Indeed, you've covered a lot of ground there, Ambassador. Let me delve into specifics now. Coming to you, Professor Ranjan. First question, can she appeal against the verdict? What legal remedies does she have?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, she can certainly appeal against the verdict at the Bangladesh Supreme Court. But I just want to quickly reflect on what Ambassador Sikri mentioned. It's correct. I mean, one view certainly is that ICT was created to, try the war crimes that were committed in 1971 war. But let's not forget that the ICT was revived in 2009-10. And its mandate was expanded in 24-25. Now, arguably, that was done in order to cover the so-called crimes against humanity that the Sheikh Hasina government committed. Now, whether that is legal or illegal is a moot issue. Whether we like it or not, there is a government in Bangladesh which is in control of the country. So it is a government as far as international law is concerned. Now, whether that government is a legitimate government under the law of Bangladesh is indeed a debatable or a moot question. Now, the real issue here is what happens to the extradition request that Bangladesh officially made to India in December 2024, if I'm correct. India hasn't rejected the request. India hasn't taken a final call on it. But given the extradition treaty that India and Bangladesh have, is India under a legal obligation to extradite Sheikh Hasina? That really is the key question. Now, the answer is yes. If any request is made, the other state is under a legal obligation. But then there are quite a few exceptions in the extradition treaty which one will have to carefully look at. Now, some people are of the view that there is an exception for political offenses. And under that, Sheikh Hasina should not be extradited because the whole thing is political and this is a political vendetta against her. This is Article 6 of the extradition treaty. But there's Article 6.2 of the extradition treaty, which actually says that certain offenses are not considered political in nature. So, for example, crimes against humanity, which is what she has been convicted for, is not a considered political offense. So the political exception perhaps will not work there. I mean, there could be other exceptions that one will have to look at. And if you want, I can sort of talk about that as well. But the political exception perhaps will be of limited
fair enough.
As far as Sheikh Hasina's extradition request is concerned.
Right. Professor Ranjan, you made a nuanced point. I want to take that point across from Ambassador Sikri. Ambassador Sikri, the International Crimes Tribunal was set up after Sheikh Hasina won the 2008 election. Now, this tribunal has convicted certain Islamist politicians for committing war crime during the 71 War of Independence from Pakistan. But some of them have also been hanged to death. Today, the same tribunal has convicted Sheikh Hasina, but Sheikh Hasina makes two distinctions. One, and I quote her here, she says, "The verdicts announced against me have been made by a rigged tribunal established and presided over by an unelected government with no democratic mandate." And two, she says, I quote her again, "There is no other motive than the personal pursuit of revenge against a democratically elected government that upheld the nation's independence and sovereignty." Your thoughts, Ambassador?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must remind my colleague on the panel and you that the mandate under which Sheikh Hasina set up the tribunal in 2010 2010 was actually the Act of Parliament passed in 1973 when Sheikh Mujib was the Prime Minister. That was the International Criminal Tribunal Act. And under that 1973 Parliamentary Act, she then set up the panel. It was expanded, I think, in 2009, and then 2010 the panel was set up. So I think to say that this unelected government of 2024-25 had any authority, because it had no parliamentary mandate, Parliament has been involved. So how can you say that it has the mandate to expand the work of the ICT? This is an interim regime. Perhaps my colleague on the panel does not know what the powers of an interim government in Bangladesh are. These are highly limited, highly restricted to holding elections within 90 days, and specifically saying that you have to maintain basic law and order and you cannot take any important decisions. So, first of all, it is also equally true, why I call it unconstitutional as a government, is that this government took their oath of allegiance on the Bangladesh constitution. And the Bangladesh constitution on which they took their oath actually does not have a provision for an interim regime. That provision was removed under the 15th Amendment. And now, of course, it is being argued in the court of Bangladesh with all these gerrymandered appointments which have been made, again, quite unconstitutionally by the Yunus regime. They're talking about now bringing back that clause. But even if they bring back that clause, what is being discussed in the law courts, it is this, that the interim regime can only be there for 90 days, no important decisions, only maintain law and order, and conduct free, fair, and inclusive elections. Now, this regime is doing nothing of the kind. It is supposed to have a group of advisors who are apolitical, who do not belong to any political party. That is a big mandated requirement of the interim regime. Whereas this interim regime has got members of the Jamaat-e-Islam, members of the Hizb ut-Tahrir as advisors, members of the Islami Andolan Bangladesh as advisors. And we all know that it is a Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the real force behind Muhammad Yunus, and decides his every move. So I do not think that we can, just sweepingly say that international law, this government has to be recognized. One has to say what the people of Bangladesh want. And I think this is a very important point here, because the last 15 months, the people of Bangladesh has been increasingly disillusioned with the regime of Muhammad Yunus. And today, it is the Awami League, which still has its original vote bank or its original constituency intact, if not increased. And it is apprehension of this that Muhammad Yunus has decided to ban the activities of the Awami League. In fact, when he was in New York a month or so ago, and in an interview was asked why he was banned the Awami League, he said, no, I have not banned the Awami League. I have only banned the activities of the Awami League. So then he was asked, will you restore it? Yes, the Election Commission can restore it if they want. So my point is that right now, if there's any kind of credibility to be given to what is happening in Bangladesh, the need of the hour is to have free, fair, inclusive, and credible elections. I'd like to point out, for example, that in Sri Lanka, when the Gen Z expressed their anger against the Rajapaksa regime, and the Rajapaksa regime resigned, the youngsters decided to go back to parliament. They had an interim president, and when elections were held, the Rajapaksa's party was allowed to participate in the elections. There was no ban on the Rajapaksa party, even though they were so unpopular and even though they had been brought down. Similarly, in Nepal, Prime Minister Oli has resigned, but there is no ban on his party participating in the forthcoming elections. So I don't see any reason why there is this decision to ban the activities of the Awami League, and this is making the Yunus regime even more unpopular. Because Jamaat-e-Islami, as we all know, has never got more than 10-12% of the population. Now they want to eliminate any popular parties, Awami League, Jatiya Party too is being left out, so that they get a higher percentage of the vote. Now, I think that it is this kind of non-democratic activities that is making the people there more and more unhappy, and really recalling that it was much better under Sheikh Hasina. And even the activities that Sheikh Hasina government was accused of by the Yunus regime are now exactly what they are doing. They're accusing, in the court cases, they accused Sheikh Hasina of ordering a firing on the people to kill. And today in Dhaka, the Yunus regime did the same thing. Before the verdict was announced, they issued an order to kill, saying if anybody disturbs the peace, just shoot to kill. So what I'm trying to say is that anytime a government is trying to maintain law and order in a country, various decisions are taken at that time. But to, on a one-sided basis, to try this part of the one part of the activity and to say that everybody else will be indemnified because they were part of a revolution, this doesn't give any credibility. It doesn't give any sense. And to say that we are obliged to extradite, absolutely not. The extradition treaty has a process. We all know ourselves that whom India has been wanting to extradite, people who are today in the UK or other places, how difficult the process is, how many years and years go by before the extradition takes place. There is a process. There is a legal process which has to be gone through in the country where the individual whose extradition is requested is living, and that process is very clear and detailed. And actually, there has been no evidence presented in the court in Bangladesh on 1,400 people killed. Who were these people? Where is the post-mortem? Where did they die? Who is accused of shooting them? Are you accusing Sheikh Hasina of taking a gun? All of them, all of these things are things become very important indeed.
Indeed. Let me quickly get in a legal perspective from Professor Ranjan. Professor Ranjan, Sheikh Hasina makes another point. She says she has repeatedly challenged the interim government to bring these charges before the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But she says, and here I quote her again, the interim government also fears that the ICC would scrutinize its own record of human rights breaches in office. The interim government will not accept this challenge because it knows that the ICC would acquit me. Which raises two questions really. One, do we know whether Dhaka intends to move the ICC? And two, what will the legal implications be if it indeed does so?
Well, I don't think that Dhaka is interested in moving the ICC on this matter. But I think we need to understand, we need to be conceptually clear that when we say that a regime is constitutional or unconstitutional, we basically answer that question by applying the domestic law of that country. Now, it's quite probable that regime is unconstitutional as per Bangladeshi law. That's a separate question. My comment is that from international law point of view, a regime is constitutional or unconstitutional cannot be decided on the basis of any international law test. The only test that we have in international law is that there is a government which is in control of the country, and that government is the legally recognized government. Now, it is completely the prerogative of different countries that they don't want to recognize a particular government in the sense they don't want to have diplomatic relations with that government. That's a completely different matter. But as far as the state of Bangladesh is concerned, there is a government which is in control of Bangladesh. And therefore, that is a government under international law. Now, the other argument could be that we apply the test of what is known as democratic legitimacy, and we say that this government is not elected and therefore it is not a recognized government under international law. But that test is not settled, and that test has its own sort of supporters and those who oppose it. But the larger point is this, that, I don't want to take any sides. I don't speak for Sheikh Hasina. I don't speak for the interim government in Bangladesh. I'm speaking purely as an international lawyer.
Fair enough.
And as an international lawyer, there is a process that has been set up in Bangladesh. Now, Sheikh Hasina happens to be in India. There is a treaty between India and Bangladesh on extradition. If a request is made, that request has already been made. India will have to take a call on that request, that whether they want to extradite or they don't want Sheikh Hasina to be extradited. I'm only saying that there are provisions within the extradition treaty under which it can be
But Professor, India has not yet officially commented whether she is in the country or not. But be that as it may, Ambassador, you wanted to comment quickly.
I mean, this request came to India in December 2024.
Fair enough.
The request came to India in December 2024. The government is on record to say that we have received the request, but they have not taken a clear decision.
Can I quickly go across, Ambassador, one last time? Yeah, Ambassador.
I want to say one thing, that a one-liner note verbal is not an extradition request. I'm sure my very distinguished colleague is aware of the full legal process that has to accompany an extradition request. During various points where I was posted, I have dealt with these extradition requests. So I know what is an extradition request. The request made in December 2024, which our government certainly acknowledged that the note verbal has been received, of course, and the request made today by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and somebody else, another advisor said that if you don't extradite, then it will be increase of enmity between India and Bangladesh. These kind of rhetorical statements do not with the law of extradition, or the extradition treaty which exists between India and Bangladesh. All the clauses have to be fulfilled. A formal extradition request has to be accompanied by all documents, and it is not a formal extradition request unless the documents are there. There is no way that the government of India can even start to act on this one-liner request unless documents are provided. That's all.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I would leave it at that. Ambassador Veena Sikri, Professor Parashwaran, thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. And still to come on DD India News Hour. India Pavilion opens at Dubai Air Show. An exclusive conversation with Finland's education ambassador about scope for further collaboration.
Can the US launch a bombing campaign against Iran? The Philippines vessel suffered structural damage. The saga of child sexual abuse is the United States China's debt trap strategy. Truth is stranger than fiction. But sometimes hard to uncover. Trust us to tell the truth, unadulterated and pure, of every story that matters to you. You read between the lines, cut the clutter, and connect the dots to get you the full picture. Watch Connecting the Dots at these times with me, only on.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Finland's education ambassador and model has long been regarded as one of the most innovative in the world. As India advances towards its Vision 2047, Finland's experience in education reform is finding new relevance in this partnership. DD India's Jessica Taneja spoke to Finland's education ambassador about the role that Finnish education sector is playing in supporting India's goals and how both countries are working to make student and faculty mobility smoother amid rising Indian interest in Finnish higher education.
We have with us Ms. Uti Hakanen. She is the Ambassador for Education in Finland. Thank you for joining us here in New Delhi. What makes it so important for your visit to India, especially as an Ambassador for Education? What kind of collaborations are you looking for?
Well, India is extremely important for Finland as a collaborator and partner country. India is actually the most interesting country now when we look at Education Finland members looking for partnerships and enhancing the ones that they already have. We have a delegation here to direct India with companies that already have good existing partnerships here, and they want to enhance them and also look for new ones.
What role does the Finnish education sector play in supporting India's vision of 2047 and its national education policy moving in the future?
Well, it's quite interesting to learn that your national education policy very much aligns with what we have in Finland. You have written down a lot of those values and targets that we share a lot of them with you. So it will be extremely interesting to see how you implement it and what there is for us to work together with you. Finnish universities have a lot of cooperation both on teacher training and curricular development, which are extremely important areas.
A lot of Indian students have shown interest in Finnish universities. What is being done to enable ease of movement in terms of mobility, both for the faculty as well as the students?
Well, what is happening actually right now is that from our part, the Ministry of Economy and Employment is the governmental partner to negotiate on a memorandum of understanding on mobility. So immigration and mobility issues are tackled and handled in that joint paper, which is about to be finalized very, very soon, actually, I've heard. So that is one sign of tightening our collaboration and making it even easier for Indian students and talents to join our student life and our labor market, where we really warmly welcome you.
External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow on Monday. During his opening remark, Minister Jaishankar said that India and Russia will sign several bilateral agreements during President Vladimir Putin's visit to India.
As we prepare for President Putin's visit to India for the 23rd Annual Summit, a number of bilateral agreements, initiatives and projects are under discussion in various fields. We look forward to the finalization in the coming days. This will certainly add more substance and texture to our special and privileged strategic partnership. We will also be exchanging views on the complex global situation with the openness that has always characterized our ties. This includes the Ukraine conflict as also the Middle East and Afghanistan, amongst others. India supports recent efforts towards establishing peace.
Home Minister Amit Shah on Monday chaired the 32nd meeting of the Northern Zonal Council in Faridabad. The session began with tributes and a 2-minute silence for those killed in the recent car bomb blast in New Delhi and the explosion at the Naugam police station in Jammu and Kashmir. In his address, the Home Minister reaffirmed the government's resolve to stamp out terrorism, saying that under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, eliminating it from its roots remains a collective national commitment. The 19th Dubai Air Show opened on Monday at Dubai World Central, bringing together more than 1,500 exhibitors from 115 countries. This year's edition features 440 first-time participants and over 200 aircraft in static and flying displays. India marked a strong presence at the air show as India's Minister of State for Defence Sanjay Seth inaugurated the India Pavilion, which features displays from HAL and DRDO, among others. 9 aircraft from India's Hindustan Aeronautics Limited Suryakaran aerobatic team, led by Group Captain Ajay Dashrathi, performed a stunning display at the Dubai Air Show. Minister Seth also inaugurated the BrahMos stall, calling the supersonic cruise missile a major attraction at the Dubai Air Show. He said that 40 Indian companies, including 15 startups, are showcasing the country's indigenous defense capabilities, reflecting India's rapid progress and successful use of homegrown systems during Operation Sindoor.
दुबई एयर शो एक अम्ब्रेला के नीचे चाइनीज कंपनी और जिसमें 15 स्टार्टअप है। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी का जो मंत्र है इंडिजिनस, और वो इंडिजिनस भारत की रक्षा मंत्रालय ने बहुत तेजी से आगे बढ़ाया। तभी दुनिया भारत की ओर देख रही है। भारत की इसलिए ओर देख रही है कि ऑप सिंदूर में जो 23 मिनट के अंदर 22 मिनट के अंदर जो पाकिस्तान को नी पे लाया, दुनिया हतप्रभ इसलिए कि भारत ने अपने इंडिजिनस सिस्टम से, अपने स्वदेशी हथियार से भारत ने पाकिस्तान को नी पे लाया।
In sports news, Grandmaster Arjun Erigesi kept India's challenge alive at the FIDE World Cup in Goa, holding Chinese star Wei Yi to a confident 31-move draw in their quarter-final opener. The Indian prodigy showed superb preparation in the Ruy Lopez closed system, maintaining a time edge throughout and simplifying it into a drawn rook and pawn ending. With the white pieces in Game 2, he now has a golden chance to press for victory and move closer to the Vishwanathan Anand Cup final and a candidate's 2026 berth. The 34th Himalayan 100-mile stage race wrapped up in India's Darjeeling, celebrating endurance against the stunning backdrop of the eastern Himalayas. Germany's Anton Schäfer claimed the overall crown, while the UK's Janet Payne led the women's field. Adventurers from across continents hailed the race not just for its challenge, but for its breathtaking scenery and rich Himalayan heritage, making it one of the world's most iconic stage runs. And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can get the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. You may wish to scan the QR code that's now on the screen to download it. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.